Keep my mother's name out of your mouth. Uncle. Unless, of course, you're looking for a reason to answer to my father. I'd choose my next words very carefully if I were you. The voice sliced through the Los Angeles mansion's dining room like a blade. Small, young, but carrying an authority that made every billionaire freeze mid-conversation. Heads whipped toward the doorway, where a 6-year-old boy stood, his mixed heritage features blazing with protective fury that didn't belong on a child's face. Min Ho Young's champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. His wife, Hannah, went rigid. His mother, Young's son, Hee, actually gasped because standing in the doorway, backlit by imported Italian sconces, was a child who looked impossible. The boy had Anna Reckel's deep brown skin and signature curls, but everything else screamed Young. The razor-sharp cheekbones that defined their dynasty. The penetrating dark eyes that froze subordinates. Even his posture, spine straight, chin lifted with unconscious arrogance, pure bloodline. But that was impossible. Min Ho had no children. He'd made absolutely certain of that 7 years ago with that woman, the one who tried trapping him with pregnancy claims he'd refused to believe. Who? Hannah's voice strangled. Who are you? The boy didn't acknowledge her. His eyes locked on Min Ho, with cold assessment that shouldn't exist in a 6-year-old. My mother stepped outside to take a business call because she has manners and didn't want to interrupt your dinner party. His voice carried with eerie clarity. I heard you through the terrace window. Every single word you said about her. Rex. A woman's voice cut through, tight with maternal worry. Baby, I told you to wait in the sitting room. And then she appeared. Anna Reckel, Min Ho's ex-lover. The curvy black woman his family had accused of theft, gold digging, fabricating pregnancy to trap their golden son. The woman they'd humiliated, degraded, paid $75,000 to disappear like she'd never existed. Except this, Anna didn't look erased. She looked upgraded. She wore a tailored cream suit that probably cost more than the designer gowns Hannah and her sisters-in-law wore combined. Her natural curls framed her face in a style screaming celebrity stylist. Subtle diamond jewelry caught the light. Real stones. Old cut, the kind you inherited. Not bought. She moved with fluid confidence that made Min Ho's throat tighten with something he refused to acknowledge as regret. Her curves, which his mother once cruelly called inappropriate for our family's image, were displayed with such unapologetic elegance that even the Jung family's business associates couldn't help staring. Mama, Rex said without breaking eye contact with Min Ho, he called you a parasite. He told Aunt Hannah you were trying to crawl back to the family trough for scraps. He said you were desperate, pathetic, and that you'd always be nothing. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Every Jung family member present, every carefully vetted business partner, every strategically invited society guest for what was supposed to be an exclusive, intimate family gathering, stared at this impossible child and the woman they'd convinced themselves they'd successfully destroyed. Is this true? An ancient voice cracked through the silence like a gunshot. Jung Tae-won, the family patriarch, 94 years old and still sharp as surgical steel, pushed his wheelchair forward from where he'd been observing near the marble fireplace. His eyes, the same penetrating gaze his great-grandson inherited, swept across his children and grandchildren with withering disapproval. Did you insult this woman in my home, Min Ho? Each word was precise, cutting. After I specifically invited her and her family here tonight as my honored guests, you invited her. Min Ho's voice cracked with disbelief, his face flushing crimson. The carefully constructed image of the family's golden son shattered in real time. Hey, beautiful people. Before we dive into how Anna Reckel walked back into the Jung family mansion 7 years after they tried to erase her, before we see her standing in that dining room wearing confidence like armor while her 6-year-old son defends her honor, we need to understand how she got here. We need to go back to a broken woman who thought she was worthless and a man who taught her she was priceless. This is a story about revenge. Yes, but it's also about redemption, about a curvy black woman who refused to stay destroyed, about a billionaire who chose ethics over empire, about a family built on love instead of legacy, and the reckoning that happens when the people who threw you away realize you were the prize all along. If you're here for protective men who see strength in survival, for women who rebuild themselves brick by brick, for love stories where healing meets justice, then you're exactly where you need to be. Hit that subscribe button because we've got more stories like this coming: Korean dynasties, resilient heroines, family secrets, and the kind of emotional warfare that makes you feel everything. Smash that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what you're doing right now. Are you meal prepping, recovering from your own family drama, listening during your commute, or staying up way too late because you can't stop? What city are you in? I love knowing where my story lovers are tuning in from across the world. Now stick around, because what happens next at this dinner table will change everything Anna thought she knew about justice, family, and what it means to finally win. The silence stretched like pulled glass, ready to shatter. Anna Reckles stood in the doorway of the Jung family dining room, her hand resting protectively on Rex's shoulder, and watched the people who destroyed her 7 years ago struggle to reconcile the woman before them with the broken girl they remembered. Minho recovered first, his shock hardening into the familiar contempt she remembered too well. Father, I don't know what game this woman is playing, but sit down. The patriarch's command cut through the room like a whip crack. Minho's mouth snapped shut, but his eyes blazed with humiliation. Anna stepped forward, and the crowd parted instinctively. She'd learned something in 7 years. Power wasn't just about money or bloodlines. It was about believing you had the right to occupy space. The Youngs had tried to teach her she didn't belong anywhere near their world. June had spent 6 years teaching her the opposite. She took the empty seat directly across from Minho. Rex climbed into the chair beside her with the easy confidence of a child who'd never been taught to shrink himself. Hannah Jung, Minho's wife, a porcelain-skinned Korean woman who'd married into the family 3 years after Anna's exile, stared at Anna with barely concealed hostility. I don't understand what's happening here. Taewon Nim, surely you can't expect us to dine with her. With whom? The patriarch's voice was deceptively soft. Say her name. Hannah. Hannah's jaw clenched. With Anna Reckles, the woman who tried to trap Minho with a fake pregnancy. The woman who stole from this family. Anna felt Rex tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand gently. Not yet, baby. Let them show who they are. Interesting, Taewon said, his weathered fingers steepled beneath his chin. And did you witness this alleged theft yourself, Hannah? Or are you simply repeating what you were told? Hannah faltered, glancing at her husband for support. She stole a $20,000 necklace from my mother's collection. Minho interjected smoothly, his voice taking on the practiced cadence of a story he'd told many times. We have documentation, security footage, her signature on the confession. Anna smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd learned to play chess while her opponents were still playing checkers. Do you? Still. That's fascinating, Minho. I'd love to see that footage again, especially now that I can afford lawyers who specialize in coerced confessions. The color drained from Minho's face. Jung Sun-hee, the family matriarch, set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. She was a woman in her late 60s, elegant and cold as winter frost. You dare come into this house and threaten my son. I dare come into this house because your father-in-law invited me, Anna replied evenly. And I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply stating facts. 7 years ago, I was a terrified 22-year-old who signed whatever papers your lawyers put in front of me because I was 6 months pregnant and you threatened to have me deported. Today, I'm a woman with resources, legal representation, and a very good memory. She leaned forward slightly, her diamond earrings catching the chandelier light. So please, continue telling everyone about my crimes. I'm fascinated to hear how the stories evolved. Minho's sister, Ji-woo, laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that cut through the tension like breaking glass. Resources? Legal representation? Please. What did you do, Anna? Marry some desperate, divorced man who felt sorry for you? Find another family to leech off? Ji-woo. Taewon's voice carried a warning, but the younger woman was too emboldened by years of unchallenged privilege to hear it. No, father, someone needs to say it. Ji-woo turned her attention fully to Anna, her beautiful face twisted with disdain. You were nothing when Minho met you. A gallery assistant living in a cramped studio apartment in Seoul, working on an expired visa. You saw a wealthy Korean man, and you saw your ticket to permanent residency and a comfortable life. Anna took a sip of water, her hand steady. You're right about one thing. I was a gallery assistant. I worked 60-hour weeks because I loved art and believed in earning my own way. What you've conveniently forgotten is that Minho pursued me. For months. He showed up at the gallery 3 times a week, bought paintings he didn't need, insisted on taking me to dinner. Because you were exotic, Hannah spat, the word landing like a slur. A curiosity. You can't actually believe he wanted something permanent with someone like you. Someone like me. Anna repeated the words, slowly tasting their venom. You mean someone black. Someone curvy. Someone whose family didn't have 3 generations of inherited wealth. She met Hannah's gaze without flinching. Say what you mean. Hannah, stop hiding behind euphemisms. Rex's small hand found hers under the table, and Anna drew strength from her son's presence. This was why they'd come. Not for revenge, though that would be sweet, but so Rex could see his mother stand her ground. So he'd know that bullies only had the power you gave them. Jung Sunhee's voice dripped with false sweetness. We paid you $75,000 to disappear. Anna, money you clearly needed, given how quickly you signed those papers and ran back to America. And now you return with a child you're clearly trying to pass off as part of this family. Expecting what? More money? A place at this table. That child, Taewon interrupted, his voice hardening with anger Anna had never heard directed at his own family, is my great-grandson. His name is Rex Young, and he has more right to sit at this table than half the people in this room. The statement detonated like a bomb. Minho shot to his feet. That's impossible. Father, she's lying to you. We never. Never what? Anna's voice cut through his sputtering. Never had unprotected sex with me. Never promised you'd handle the consequences. Never told me you loved me right up until the moment that pregnancy test came back positive. She stood slowly, her cream suit immaculate, her posture regal. You're right, Minho. We never had a child together. The confusion rippled through the room like a shockwave. Then why? Ji-woo started. Because Rex isn't Minho's son, Anna said clearly. He never was. Minho's face cycled through confusion, relief, then sudden dread as the implications crystallized. Then whose? The dining room doors opened with perfect timing, and Jun Young stepped into his family's mansion for the first time in 7 years. 7 years ago. Seoul, South Korea. Anna Reckel had never intended to fall in love in a foreign country. She'd come to Seoul for art, not romance, a 1-year contract at the Gangnam Contemporary Gallery, a chance to immerse herself in Asian modern art, to build her resume before returning to Los Angeles to open her own space someday. Minho Young had walked into the gallery on a Tuesday afternoon in March, wearing a suit that cost more than her monthly rent. He was beautiful in that specific way wealthy Korean men could be, sharp-featured, impeccably groomed, moving through space like he owned it, which she'd later learn he basically did. His family owned half the commercial real estate in the neighborhood. Tell me about this piece, he'd said, gesturing to a controversial installation by a rising Korean artist. His English was perfect, tinged with a British accent from his Oxford education. Anna had explained the work's commentary on generational trauma and capitalist excess. Min-ho had listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asked intelligent questions, and purchased the piece for 40 million won without blinking. He came back 2 days later, then 4 days after that, then weekly, then twice a week. Each time, he'd buy something, paintings, sculptures, limited edition prints, and each time he'd find a reason to extend their conversations. He learned she loved live jazz, so he took her to the best club in Itaewon. She mentioned missing American comfort food, and he had his family's private chef prepare an elaborate Southern meal. The courtship was a fairy tale. He introduced her to his friends, other wealthy scions of Korean industry, K-pop producers, tech entrepreneurs. He took her to Jeju Island for weekends, to private beach resorts where they'd watch the sunrise from infinity pools. He whispered promises in the dark, that she was different from other women he'd known, that she challenged him, that she made him want to be better. Anna had been careful. She'd insisted on paying for things when she could, though her gallery salary made that laughable next to his wealth. She'd maintained her own apartment, her own life. She told herself she wouldn't be a cliché, the broke foreign girl swept off her feet by a rich local. But then she'd gotten pregnant. She'd taken the test 3 times, disbelieving. They'd been careful, mostly careful. There had been that weekend in Busan when they'd been careless, drunk on soju and each other, and she told herself the odds were low, that it would be fine. The test said otherwise. She told Min-ho in her tiny apartment, her hands shaking as she showed him the plastic stick with its damning double lines. For 5 long seconds, she'd watched his face transform, from surprise to calculation to something cold she'd never seen before. "You planned this," he'd said quietly. "This was always your endgame." "What?" "Min-ho, no. How long have you been off birth control? How many times did you sabotage the condoms?" His voice was rising now, that cultured Oxford accent sharpening into something cruel. "Did you think I was stupid? That I wouldn't see through this trap?" Anna had felt the room tilt. "I didn't. We were both there. We both made the choice. Get rid of it." Min-ho had stood, already reaching for his phone. "I'll pay for the procedure. A good clinic, discreet. But I want confirmation from the doctor, afterward." "I'm not." Anna's hand had moved instinctively to her still flat stomach. "I'm not getting rid of my baby." "Then you're on your own." Min-ho's eyes had been empty of everything she'd thought she'd seen there over the past 8 months. The warmth, the affection, the possibility of love. "And Anna, if you try to claim this child is mine, if you try to use this to extract money from my family, I will destroy you. Professionally, legally, socially. You will wish you'd never set foot in this country." He'd left, just walked out of her apartment and her life, leaving her trembling on the floor, one hand clutched around a positive pregnancy test, the other pressed against her mouth to muffle her sobs. She'd been naive enough to think that was the worst it could get. The Jung family had proven her wrong. 7 years ago, 1 week after the pregnancy revelation, Anna had made the mistake of going to work, of believing she could somehow hold her life together through sheer determination. She'd walked into the Gangnam Contemporary Gallery at 9 a.m., eyes swollen from another sleepless night, and found her boss waiting with 2 men in expensive suits. "Ms. Reckel," her boss had said, his voice apologetic but firm, "these gentlemen need to speak with you. Please use the conference room." The lawyers, because that's what they were, Jung family attorneys with leather portfolios and dead eyes, had laid out their case with surgical precision. The previous week, a $20,000 diamond necklace had gone missing from Jung Sunhee's private collection during a family gathering Anna had attended. Security footage showed Anna near the display case. A maid had found the necklace, conveniently, in Anna's coat pocket. The family had generously refrained from calling the police, but they had documentation. Photographs. Witness statements. "This is insane," Anna had whispered, her hands gripping the edge of the conference table. I never touched that necklace. I was barely in that room. Minho was with me the entire time. Mr. Jung has provided a statement confirming you were alone for approximately 15 minutes. The lead attorney had interrupted smoothly, during which time the necklace disappeared. The betrayal had hit her like a physical blow. Minho had lied, had orchestrated this entire scene to discredit her, to ensure that if she ever claimed paternity, she'd be dismissed as a thief, a liar, a criminal. Here is what will happen, the attorney had continued, sliding papers across the table. You will sign a non-disclosure agreement stating you will never contact the Jung family again, never claim any relationship to them, never speak publicly about your time with Minho Jung. You will resign from your position at this gallery effective immediately, and you will return to America within 1 week. And if I refuse? Anna's voice had barely been audible. Then we press charges. Theft, fraud, visa violations. We've discovered your work visa actually expired 2 weeks ago. Ms. Reckel, you're in the country illegally. You'll be arrested, tried in Korean courts where you don't speak the language, and likely serve time in a Korean prison before deportation. The attorney had paused for effect. A prison where the guards will be informed of your pregnancy, where medical care is minimal. Anna had felt her baby, barely a cluster of cells, but already her entire world, and understood she had no choice. They would destroy her and possibly harm her child if she resisted. They had the money, the connections, the power to rewrite reality itself. In exchange for your signature and your silence, the attorney had continued, the Jung family will provide you with $75,000 US. Enough to return home, to begin again, to cover medical expenses for your pregnancy. Blood money. Shut up money. Go away and let us pretend you never existed money. Anna had signed. Each stroke of the pen had felt like carving away pieces of herself. Her dignity, her trust, her belief that the world was fundamentally just. She'd signed the NDA, the confession about the necklace she never stole, the agreement never to seek paternity or support, the acknowledgement that she was leaving Korea voluntarily, and had no legal claims against the Jung family. They'd given her a cashier's check and an escort to the airport. She'd flown back to Los Angeles 6 months pregnant, $75,000 richer, and completely broken, convinced she'd never be whole again. She'd been 22 years old, alone in a foreign country, bullied into signing away her rights by people who could afford better lawyers than she could ever imagine hiring. The Youngs had taught her that power meant you could rewrite truth itself, that money could make inconvenient people disappear, that women like her were disposable. They'd thought the story ended there. They'd underestimated what a broken woman could become when someone taught her she was worth saving. 6 years and 9 months ago, Los Angeles. Anna sat in the sterile waiting room of the clinic, a pamphlet about pregnancy options crumpled in her shaking hands. She was 3 months along now, her body changing in ways that terrified her. The morning sickness had been relentless. She'd burned through half the Jung family's blood money on a tiny studio apartment in Koreatown and living expenses, and the math was becoming brutally clear. She couldn't afford to raise a child alone. Her mother was dying of stage 4 breast cancer back in Oakland, drowning in medical debt. Her father had disappeared when she was 7. She had a bachelor's degree in art history that qualified her for exactly nothing that paid enough to support a baby. The gallery jobs she'd applied for had all asked why she'd left Seoul so suddenly, and she couldn't answer without violating the NDA. She was trapped, broken, 22 years old, and convinced she'd made every wrong choice possible. You don't want to be here. The voice came from her left. A man, maybe early 30s, Korean, dressed in dark jeans, and a simple black shirt that somehow looked expensive. He wasn't looking at her, his eyes fixed on the abstract art print across from them, but he was clearly speaking to her. Excuse me? Anna's voice came out defensive, raw. You don't want to be here, he repeated, gentler this time. I can see it. The way you're holding that pamphlet, like it's a ransom note. The way you keep touching your stomach like you're apologizing to someone. Anna should have told him to mind his own business. Should have moved seats. Instead, something about his quiet certainty made her eyes burn with tears. I can't afford to keep this baby. I can barely afford to feed myself. Then why are you here instead of at home celebrating a solution? The question gutted her. Because he was right. If she truly wanted this, she'd have already been in the back room. Instead, she'd been sitting in this waiting room for 90 minutes, unable to make herself stand up and walk through that door. Because I'm a coward, Anna whispered. Because I'm terrified of being alone, of failing, of raising a child in poverty. But I'm more terrified of living the rest of my life, wondering who they would have become. The man finally turned to look at her, and Anna was struck by his eyes, dark, penetrating, but carrying a sadness that seemed older than his years. You're not a coward. You're here because you're trying to make an impossible choice between two futures, both of which terrify you. That's not cowardice. That's being human. He stood, pulled out his wallet, and handed her a business card. I'm going to tell you something that might sound insane from a stranger. You're not alone anymore. If you walk out of this clinic, if you choose to keep your baby, I will make sure you have what you need. Medical care, housing, a job. Not because I want something from you, but because I've seen too many people destroyed by families that should have protected them. Anna stared at the card. Jun Young, independent tech consultant. Young, the same last name that haunted her nightmares. Her voice strangled. Minho's older brother, Jun confirmed quietly. The family outcast. The one they pretend doesn't exist because I refuse to join their corruption. I know what they did to you, Anna Reckel. I know about the necklace, the NDA, the threats. And I know my brother is a coward who destroys people because our family taught him women are disposable. Why would you help me? Anna's hands were trembling so badly the business card fluttered. You don't know me. Because 7 years ago, my family destroyed the woman I loved in almost exactly the same way. They accused her of stealing, of gold digging, of trying to trap me for money. They paid her off and sent her away, and I was too weak to stop them. She married someone else, moved to Singapore, and I never saw her again. Jun's jaw tightened. I can't fix what I failed to do then, but I can make sure history doesn't repeat itself. So I'm asking you, Anna, do you want to keep your baby? Anna looked down at her still flat stomach, at the life growing inside her that she'd created with a man who'd proven himself a monster. But this baby wasn't Minho. This baby was hers, innocent, deserving of a chance. Yes, she whispered. God help me. Yes. Then let's get out of here, Jun said, extending his hand. And let me show you that not all young men are monsters. If you are still listening, smash that subscribe button and let us know in the comments who you are rooting for. Your support keeps these epic tales coming, so subscribe and join our community of today. 6 years ago to present, Jun Young kept his promises with a quiet thoroughness that Anna found almost unsettling. Within a week of their clinic encounter, he'd secured her a position at a boutique gallery in Santa Monica, not as an assistant, but as an associate curator with a salary that made her gasp. He'd moved her from her cramped Koreatown studio to a 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood with good schools nearby. I'm not a charity case. Anna had protested during the move, even as relief flooded through her. No, Jun had agreed, carrying a box of her books. You're an investment. I've seen your work. Your eye for emerging artists. That gallery is lucky to have you. I'm just making sure you're not too stressed to show them what you're capable of. It took 3 months before Anna understood the full picture. Jun wasn't just helping her out of guilt or revenge against his family. He was building something, a network of people his family had damaged, a quiet coalition of the discarded and destroyed. He'd helped fund startups for entrepreneurs his family had tried to crush. He'd paid legal fees for employees his family had wrongfully terminated. He'd created scholarships for students his family's companies had discriminated against. Why do all this? Anna had asked one evening when she was 7 months pregnant, her feet swollen, sharing takeout with June in her apartment while he assembled a crib he'd insisted on buying. Because the Jung family built their empire on breaking people, June had said, his voice quiet but fierce. My grandfather started with legitimate shipping, but my father and uncles turned it into something ugly. Bribery, money laundering, exploitation. They taught Minho and Jiwoo that people like you and me, people who don't fit their perfect image, are disposable. I refuse to let that worldview win. When Anna's mother's cancer worsened, June had flown to Oakland with her, held her hand in the hospital corridor, and quietly paid for experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. When Anna went into labor 5 weeks early, terrified and alone, June had been the one in the delivery room, coaching her breathing, letting her squeeze his hand until his bones ached. He'd held Rex for the first time with tears in his eyes. He's perfect, Anna. Look at him. He's absolutely perfect. The courtship had been slow, careful, built on late-night conversations and shared trauma, and the gradual realization that they understood each other in ways no one else could. June never pushed, never demanded, just remained steady, present, proving through actions that not all men disappeared when things got difficult. Anna fell in love with him somewhere between month 8, when he'd stayed up all night researching black hair care, so he could help with Rex's curls, and month 14, when he'd proposed not with a grand gesture, but with quiet certainty, I want to be Rex's father. Not because I'm trying to replace anyone, but because I already love him like he's mine. And I love you, Anna. Not to fix you, not to save you, but because you're the strongest person I've ever met, and I want to build a life with you. They'd married on a beach in Malibu when Rex was 1 year old. A small ceremony with Anna's mother in a wheelchair, a handful of close friends, and the Pacific Ocean as witness. No Jung family members were invited. As far as Minho and his relatives knew, June had simply vanished into obscurity years ago, a failure who'd squandered his trust fund and disappeared into irrelevance. They had no idea what he'd actually been building. While the Jung family's empire stagnated, trapped in old industries and corrupt practices, June had been investing in the future. Tech startups, renewable energy, cryptocurrency before it exploded. He'd taken his modest trust fund and turned it into $8 billion through intelligence, timing, and a refusal to compromise his ethics. And all the while, he'd been gathering evidence. Financial records from disgruntled employees. Testimonies from people his family had destroyed. Paper trails of bribes, shell companies, money laundering schemes that would make federal prosecutors salivate. Why haven't you exposed them? Anna had asked once, 2 years into their marriage, watching June work late into the night on his investigation. Because I'm waiting for the perfect moment, June had replied, his smile sharp. When they're most vulnerable, when they think they've won, when my father is dying and desperate to secure his legacy. He'd closed his laptop and pulled Anna into his arms. They taught me to play the long game. I'm just better at it than they are. Now, 7 years after they destroyed Anna, 6 years after June had saved her, the perfect moment had finally arrived. Jung Tae-won was dying. The family empire was fracturing. And Jun Jung was about to walk into his family's dining room with his wife, his son, and enough evidence to burn their world to ash. 5 years ago, Malibu, California. The beach ceremony had been everything Anna never knew she needed. Intimate, honest, stripped of pretense. Just 15 people witnessed Jun Jung and Anna Reckel exchange vows as the Pacific crashed against the shore behind them. Anna's mother sat in her wheelchair at the front, oxygen tubes in her nose, but tears of joy streaming down her face. Rex, barely a year old, had gurgled happily in the arms of June's college friend, who'd flown in from New York. I promise to be the father Rex deserves, June had said, his voice breaking slightly as he looked at the baby. Not to replace anyone, but to show him what it means when a man chooses love over legacy, family over bloodline, truth over convenience. Anna had barely made it through her own vows. You found me in my darkest moment and didn't try to fix me. You just held space while I fixed myself. You taught me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. That surviving abuse makes you stronger, not damaged. They'd honeymooned for a weekend in Big Sur, Rex between them in the bed, and returned to Los Angeles to build something neither of their families would recognize. A marriage based on mutual respect, shared trauma, and the revolutionary act of choosing each other every single day. The decision to keep their family hidden from the Youngs had been strategic. June had been planning his revenge for years before meeting Anna, and her arrival had only sharpened his focus. Every month, he received reports from investigators he'd hired, former Jung Industries employees with axes to grind, forensic accountants who'd stumbled on irregularities, competitors who'd been crushed by the family's corrupt practices. They're getting sloppy, June had told Anna one night, when Rex was 2, spreading financial documents across their dining table. Minho's embezzlement is escalating. My father's bribes are becoming more brazen. They think they're untouchable because they've always been untouchable. That arrogance will be their downfall. Anna had learned to live with the weight of secrets. At gallery openings, she wore her wedding ring but introduced herself as Anna Park, her mother's maiden name. When other mothers at Rex's preschool asked about her husband, she kept details vague. He works in tech, travels a lot. She perfected the art of being visible yet invisible, present yet protected. Rex had been the unexpected complication, not in their marriage, but in their secrecy. By age 4, he was asking questions with unsettling intelligence. Why don't I have grandparents like other kids? Why doesn't Appa talk about his family? June had sat their son down with remarkable honesty. My family hurt people, buddy. They hurt your mama before you were born. They don't know about you because we're keeping you safe until we can make sure they can never hurt any of us again. Are they bad guys? Rex had asked, his mixed features, Anna's deep brown skin, June's sharp Korean bone structure, scrunched with concern. They're people who made bad choices, June had corrected gently. Sometimes that's worse than being a villain. Villains know they're doing wrong. My family convinced themselves their cruelty was justified. As Rex grew, so did June's empire and his evidence collection. Tech investments exploded. Renewable energy portfolios doubled. The offshore accounts he'd hidden from his family now contained $8 billion, more wealth than 3 generations of Jung corruption had accumulated. And every dollar was clean, legitimate, ethically earned. Meanwhile, Jung Industries struggled. Market share evaporated. Key executives jumped ship. Younger competitors disrupted their traditional strongholds. Taewon's health declined, first a heart attack, then the cancer diagnosis. The patriarch who'd once seemed immortal was suddenly mortal, desperate to secure his legacy before time ran out. That desperation had led to the dinner invitation. June had stared at the formal card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, his grandfather's distinctive calligraphy, and known the moment had finally arrived. He wants to meet Rex. June had told Anna, his voice tight with conflicting emotions. He knows. Somehow he found out about us. Anna had felt ice in her veins. How? Does it matter? June had pulled her close. The question is, are we ready? Because once we walk into that house, once they see you and Rex, there's no going back. Everything I've built, all the evidence I've gathered, it all comes out. The war begins. Anna had looked at their son. Now 6 years old, brilliant and kind, and blissfully unaware of the generational trauma he'd been born into. She thought about the girl she'd been 7 years ago, broken, terrified, convinced she was worthless because cruel people had told her so. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd survived, rebuilt, and learned that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was thriving so loudly your abusers choked on their regret. We're ready, Anna had said. Let's show them what they threw away. Present day, Jung, family mansion. June Jung stepped into the dining room like a knife entering silk, smooth, inevitable, lethal. 7 years since he'd walked these marble floors, and nothing had changed except him. The room still reeked of old money and older sins. The family still sat in their assigned hierarchy, patriarch at the head, sons and daughters-in-law arranged by birth order and importance, grandchildren scattered like decorative accessories. But June was no longer the idealistic 30-year-old they'd exiled for refusing to launder money through shell corporations. He'd evolved into something they didn't have words for, a man who'd taken their rejection and turned it into fuel, who'd built an empire that made theirs look quaint, who'd married the woman they destroyed and raised her to heights they'd never reach. He wore a Tom Ford suit that cost more than Min Ho's monthly salary. His Patek Philippe watch caught the chandelier light, not the flashy sports model young executives favored, but the understated complication that billionaires recognized. Power wasn't about looking rich. It was about moving through space like you own the oxygen. The room had gone silent when he entered. Min Ho's face cycled through shock, confusion, and dawning horror. Hannah's mouth literally fell open. Ji Woo, grabbed the table edge like the floor, had tilted. Only Taewon remained composed, though something like satisfaction flickered in his ancient eyes. June. Min Ho's voice cracked. What are you doing here? I was invited. June's eyes swept the room, cataloging faces, noting exits, reading body language the way a chess master reads the board. By grandfather. Apparently, he wanted the whole family together for once. He moved to Rex first, crouching to his son's level. You okay, buddy? Did anyone hurt you or your mama? No, Appa. Rex threw his arms around June's neck. But Uncle Min Ho said really mean things about Mama, called her a leech, and said she was desperate. June stood slowly, Rex in his arms, his other hand reaching for Anna and pulling her to his side in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. His eyes locked on Min Ho with the kind of cold fury that made grown men reconsider their choices. Did you? Not a question. A statement of fact that demanded accounting. Min Ho's face flushed. I didn't know she was, that you were. He gestured helplessly between June and Anna. You married her? You married my ex-girlfriend. Your ex-girlfriend. June's voice was soft, dangerous. Interesting way to describe a woman you got pregnant, then had your lawyers threaten and coerce into signing away her rights while holding her immigration status over her head. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. You married your brother's ex. Hannah's voice climbed an octave. That's disgusting. That's practically legal. June interrupted smoothly. Perfectly legal. We've been married 6 years. Rex was born 7 months after our wedding. We live in Beverly Hills. I run a multi-billion-dollar international corporation, and we're extraordinarily happy. His smile was sharp enough to cut. But please continue with the moral outrage. It's entertaining. Son, he finally found her voice, though it shook with barely controlled fury. 6 years? You've been married 6 years and never told us, never introduced your wife to your family. Why would I? June's tone was genuinely curious. You made it abundantly clear 7 years ago that I wasn't family anymore when I refused to help you launder money through Singapore shell companies. You cut me off, disowned me, told me I was weak, that I'd amount to nothing without the family name. He paused, letting the words settle. I took you at your word. Everything I built, the company, the wealth, this beautiful family, I did it without you. Why would I share any of it with people who chose corruption over their own son? I invited them. Taewon's voice cut through the tension like a gavel. I invited June and his family because I wanted to meet my great-grandson before I die. Because I'm 94 years old and tired of watching this family destroy itself with pride and prejudice. You knew. Son, he turned on her father-in-law, betrayal sharp in her voice. You knew June had married that woman, and you said nothing? That woman has a name. June's voice dropped to something lethal. Her name is Anna Young. She's my wife, the mother of my son. And the next person who disrespects her will deeply regret it. If you have been enjoying this story so far, kindly subscribe and hit the notification bell to ensure you're part of the inner circle for every new release. The screen might go black, but the legend continues. Don't miss the next epic story. June set Rex down gently, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim tablet. The gesture was casual, almost lazy, but every person in the room recognized the threat it represented. In the digital age, power wasn't just about money or bloodlines. It was about information, and June had always been better at gathering it than using it recklessly. Since we're all together, June said, his voice conversational as he tapped the screen, I thought this might be a good time to discuss the family business. Specifically, why Jung Industries' stock price has dropped 40% in the last 18 months. Why 3 major investors pulled out last quarter. Why the SEC has been making inquiries about offshore accounts. Minho's face went ashen. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? June's smile was predatory. He turned the tablet around, and the dining room's smart screen flickered to life, mirroring his display. Spreadsheets appeared. Columns of numbers, bank transfers, dates, and amounts that made several family members shift uncomfortably. These are wire transfers from Jung Industries' operational accounts to shell corporations in the Cayman Islands. June narrated calmly, like he was presenting a business proposal rather than detonating his family's lives. The corporations are registered to holding companies that trace back to, let me see, Minho Jung, Jiwoo Park Ne Jung, and interestingly, Sun Hee Jung. How did you? Sun Hee started, then caught herself. But the damage was done. The admission hung in the air. How did I get access to confidential financial records? June's eyebrow arched. I've had 6 years and $8 billion worth of resources. Mother, I hired forensic accountants, private investigators, former Jung Industries employees who were tired of being complicit in fraud. People talk when you pay them enough and promise protection from retaliation. He swiped to the next screen. Email exchanges appeared, damning in their casual discussion of bribes, kickbacks, and manipulated contracts. These are communications between Minho and Jung Industries consultants, which is an interesting term for the government officials you've been bribing to secure construction permits and zoning changes. This is illegal. Jiwoo's voice cracked. You can't just hack into private emails and... I didn't hack anything, June interrupted smoothly. I received them from employees who were CC'd on these messages. Employees who kept copies because they were smart enough to know they might need insurance against being scapegoated when everything inevitably collapsed. You made a lot of people very angry over the years. Turns out they were willing to share. Anna watched her husband systematically dismantle his family's empire with surgical precision and felt something fierce and bright bloom in her chest. This was why they'd waited, why they'd endured years of secrecy, of keeping Rex hidden, of building their evidence base until it was unassailable. Revenge wasn't about destroying your enemies quickly. It was about waiting until they were most vulnerable, then showing them exactly how much power they'd given away when they underestimated you. June continued, relentless. The embezzlement totals approximately $47 million over the past 8 years. The bribery scheme involves at least 15 government officials across 3 agencies. The tax evasion, and this is my personal favorite, involves real estate holdings registered under false names, rental income never reported, and a truly creative interpretation of business expenses. He paused, letting the information sink in. Minho had gone gray. Sun Hee clutched her wine glass so hard her knuckles were white. Jiwoo looked like she might vomit. Even Hannah, who'd married into the family after much of this occurred, seemed to understand the magnitude of what was being revealed. Here's what's going to happen, June said, his voice dropping to something quiet and absolutely final. You have a choice. Option 1. You publicly apologize to Anna. You admit what you did to her 7 years ago, the false theft accusation, the coerced NDA, the threats against her visa status. You restructure Jung Industries with independent oversight, clean house of every executive involved in fraud, and commit to operating ethically going forward. Or, Minho's voice was barely a whisper. June's smile was terrifying in its pleasantness. Or I send everything I have to the FBI, the SEC, the IRS, and every major news outlet in Seoul and Los Angeles. I've already written the press releases. I have journalists on standby who would love to break the story of a Korean chaebol family's multi-generational corruption scheme. You'll be arrested. Your assets will be frozen. Jung Industries will collapse under the scandal. And every person in this room will spend the next decade in federal court, if not federal prison. You'd destroy your own family? Sunhee's voice shook with disbelief and rage. You're not my family, June said simply. You stopped being my family when you chose money over morality, reputation over human decency. Anna is my family. Rex is my family. You're just people I happen to share DNA with, people who've proven repeatedly that you'll hurt anyone who threatens your perfect image. He looked at his grandfather, the only person in the room who didn't seem shocked by the revelations. I'm doing this for him, because grandfather called me when he got his diagnosis and told me he was dying knowing he'd built something rotten. He asked me to give them one chance to choose differently. So here it is. One chance. Taewon nodded slowly, his ancient eyes sharp with something like pride. I asked June to compile this evidence. I asked him to come here tonight because I wanted to see if there was anything worth saving in this family, or if we'd gone too far down the path of corruption to find our way back. Father, Sunhee's voice broke. How could you? We're your family. We've built everything for this family's legacy. You've built a monument to greed, the old man said tiredly, and you've sacrificed good people on its altar. Anna wasn't the first woman this family destroyed, and she wouldn't have been the last if June hadn't stopped you. So now you choose. Change or collapse. Those are your only options. The silence that followed was deafening. Anna could hear her own heartbeat, Rex's breathing beside her, the distant sound of waves crashing against the beach far below the mansion. This moment, this precise intersection of truth and consequence, was what they'd been building toward for 6 years. Minho broke first, as weak men often did when confronted with the results of their choices. This is insane. You can't just blackmail us into. It's not blackmail when the evidence is real and the crimes are prosecutable. June interrupted. It's consequences. Something this family has avoided for 3 generations through money and connections. Those protections are gone now. The politicians you bribed are facing their own investigations. The officials you paid off are cooperating with federal prosecutors to save themselves. Your fortress has termites, and I spent 6 years making sure the foundation would collapse when pressure was applied. Why? Hannah's question was almost a whisper. Why go to all this trouble? You have your own money, your own company, your own family. You didn't need us. Why not just walk away and let us destroy ourselves? Anna answered before June could, her voice steady and clear. Because walking away meant letting you do this to someone else. Another young woman. Another person you judge as less than because of their race, their body, their background. June couldn't save the woman his family destroyed 15 years ago, but he could make sure I was the last one. She stood, drawing herself to her full height, and addressed the room with the confidence of someone who'd survived hell and come out stronger. You tried to erase me. You accused me of theft to cover your own crimes. You threatened my visa status when I was 6 months pregnant and alone in a foreign country. You paid me $75,000 to disappear and sign away my rights, my voice, my truth, and you thought that was the end of the story. Her eyes swept across the Jung family members, landing on each face that had smiled while destroying her. But here's what you didn't understand. Broken doesn't mean defeated. You broke me, yes. You shattered my trust, my sense of safety, my belief in justice. But in doing so, you also freed me from caring what people like you think. You gave me nothing left to lose, which meant I had everything to gain. Minho couldn't meet her gaze. Good. Let him sit with his shame. I rebuilt myself, Anna continued. I went to therapy 3 times a week for a year. I learned Korean fluently, better than I spoke it when you knew me, so I could read every document, every contract, every piece of evidence June gathered. I worked my way from gallery assistant to curator to director. I raised a brilliant, kind son who understands that strength means protecting people, not hurting them. And I married a man who proved that the Jung name didn't have to mean cruelty. Taewon was watching her with undisguised approval, and Anna realized with sudden clarity why the old man had orchestrated this entire evening. He was dying, yes, but he was also trying to rewrite his legacy in the time he had left. He wanted to see if his family could choose redemption, or if they were too far gone. I have an announcement to make, Taewon said, his voice carrying despite its age-weakened rasp, about my will and the future of this family. Every head turned to him with desperate attention. This was what it always came down to with families like this: money, inheritance, who got what portion of the empire. I'm leaving controlling interest in Jung Industries to June, Taewon said flatly. He's proven he can build something legitimate, something profitable, something that doesn't require corruption to survive. The rest of you will receive modest trusts, enough to live comfortably but not enough to be dangerous. The room erupted. Sunhee's voice rose above the chaos. Father, you can't. June abandoned us. He escaped us, Taewon corrected sharply. As he should have. And now I'm giving him the tools to repair the damage we've done. If he accepts. All eyes turned to June, who stood with his arm around Anna, Rex pressed against his side, looking every inch the king they'd tried to convince themselves he wasn't. I don't want it, June said clearly. I don't want Jung Industries. I don't want the properties or the trust or the family legacy. Keep your inheritance, grandfather. Give it to charity. Sell it off piece by piece. I don't care. June, Taewon started, something like pain crossing his weathered face. No, June's voice was firm but not unkind. I appreciate what you're trying to do. I understand you're trying to make amends before you die. But I don't need your company to validate my success. I don't need the Jung name to prove I was right to leave. I have everything I need right here. He looked down at Rex, then at Anna, and the love in his eyes was so pure it made Anna's throat tight. I have a wife who survived your worst and became extraordinary. I have a son who will grow up knowing his worth isn't tied to family approval or inherited wealth. I have a company I built on my own terms with my own ethics, creating actual value instead of extracting it from vulnerable people. That's my inheritance. That's my legacy. But the family needs leadership, Jiwoo protested weakly. Without father's guidance, without someone competent at the helm. Then hire competent leadership, June said simply. Bring in outside management. Clean house completely. Start over with people who aren't steeped in 3 generations of corruption. But leave me out of it. I'm done with Jung family drama. He turned to Anna, his voice softening. Ready to go home, love? Anna looked at the family that had tried to destroy her, at Minho's shame-stricken face, at Sunhee's disbelief, at the wreckage of their perfect image scattered across the dining table in the form of financial evidence and exposed crimes. She felt no triumph, no vindication, just exhausted relief that this chapter was finally closing. Yes, she said simply. Rex, baby, say goodbye to your great-grandfather. Rex stepped forward with the solemnity of a child who understood he was part of something important. Bye, Harabiaji. I hope you feel better soon. And I hope your family learns to be nicer. Out of the mouths of children, they walked out of the Jung family mansion together. Anna, June, and Rex. A family built on choice rather than obligation, on love rather than legacy, on truth rather than the comfortable lies that had sustained the Jungs for generations. Behind them, they left a family facing the consequences of their cruelty. Ahead lay their life in Beverly Hills, imperfect but honest, complicated but real. As they reached the car, Anna turned back one last time. The mansion loomed against the night sky, all marble and money and misery. She'd feared this place once, feared these people, feared her own worthlessness. Now she just felt free. No regrets. June asked softly. Not one, Anna said. They gave me hell, and I turned it into heaven. That's the best revenge. And there you have it. Anna Reckel walked into hell and walked out wearing a crown. The Jung family tried to erase her, but she came back with a billionaire husband, an empire of her own, and a 6-year-old son who proved that the best revenge is building something beautiful from the ashes they left you in. If this story hit you in the feels, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. Was it Rex defending his mama? June's evidence reveal? Anna's final speech? Let me know what made you cheer. Hit subscribe because we've got more stories about strong women, protective men, and families getting exactly what they deserve. Korean dynasties, forbidden love, second chances, all the emotional chaos you crave. Share this with someone who needs to hear that surviving doesn't make you broken. It makes you dangerous in the best way. Thanks for being here, loves. Remember, you are not what they did to you. You are what you chose to become after. Stay fierce, stay strong, and never let anyone dim your light.